2018 was the beginning. From podcast to live events, Fight Night Picks was off and running.
Do you typically train for a fight with a specific game plan in mind, or do you train for a certain opponent?
Honest to God, I always have the same game plan.
A year later, a new ad.
The cringe fest continues with Henry Cejudo. He pulled out a snake today. No clue.
Since then, it's been a wild ride. 2022 shaping up to be another crazy year.
Hurt Chandler. He might be peacocking right now. I think that left hook hurt.
Oh, big time right hands, Michael Chandler.
Oh, they've both been hurt this way.
Oh!
So as they say, let's get into it.
And we start the show with the intro that we started the year with, 2022 in MMA. What a year it was. Thanks so much for joining in. Craig Allen, at Craig Allen FNP on Twitter and Instagram. Matt Allen, respective socials. Matt Allen FNP. Now, listen, our year-end MMA award show. Last year, we had 15 total categories. This year, we're going to break the bank. We're going with 14, so we went down one, but we completely changed this show and a lot of new things to talk about. Matt, I know you're really excited about this one today.
I am. It is so much fun to do these year-end recap shows, and it was a really great year in MMA. I know we didn't have some of the big stars competing this year, like we have in the past, the Conor McGregors, the John Jones, but it was a really deep year, and it felt like every single pay-per-view left you talking about what the storyline was going to be going into the next one, but all after that knockdown, which is a really promising thing to see, because how many times do we see a fighter get hurt?
Oh, Burns hit Chimaev hard.
With a right hand. That might have hurt him bad.
Chimaev's still in this
Burns
one.
is landing big shots. Chimaev is hurt on the back foot. Up against the cage.
Hammering away.
I cannot believe we're seeing this right now.
The chin of Khamzat Chimaev.
And I know we're going to talk about the 3 crazy 5th round title finishes that happened this year. Like, if you want high amounts of drama, this year definitely gave it to you. Between Leon Edwards, Yuri Prochazka, and Alex Pereira, like, those are 3 of the greatest comebacks of all time. And the fact that they all happened in the same year is pretty damn remarkable.
Well, and if you expected us to look like we did in the thumbnail for this video, I kinked my neck at some point last night. I went to shave and have the handlebars. It ended up just as a regular mustache. But when we do get into all of these categories, before we get there, we do have something that we need to touch on. Matt, the three-peat is over.
I've done it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The year has been saved. Matt Allen, your winner
my goodness.
with Fight Night Picks. My wife is trying to do this from the door, and she has failed miserably trying to pop this thing. But, Matt, you do get...
As we hear empty clicks.
there is some confetti there. But, Matt, you were successful this year. If we combine the UFC picks with the Dana White's Contender Series picks, 338, 169, and 3. That's what the draws in the no contest.
I never thought I would ever figure out what it feels like to be, like, about to get killed by a hitman, but the gun jams, and that's the experience that I just felt.
Plus 6 and 4, you ended up 344 and 173. I was 341 and 176. The percentages were up this year.
And that's what really matters.
It was a big year with Fight Night Picks, but all that to say, Matt, the floor is yours. Congratulations. That lives on here in the studio.
I'm happy I finally got the win. I love Michael Jordan, and I couldn't, in good conscience, let you get to the same level as MJ in my mind. I'm sorry. So I'm happy I just got on the board now. It's kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. It's a good feeling, but there's another year ahead of us. And here's the thing. If I win next year, we're tied. And that makes for quite a lot of drama, if you ask me. So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks to all the people who supported the channel this year, too. A lot of interactions, too, and a lot of people interacted, like, during fight weeks and whatnot, via social media. That's the most fun thing to do, is talk to you guys, talk about the picks, get your guys' thoughts on the fights, too, throughout the week, and that always makes this a lot more fun.
I mean, our channel is definitely a lot different than most of them that are out there, because we focus so much time and effort on that preview, and moving forward into 2023, that's going to be the emphasis. It's a lot of the previews. But my plan is we're going to have a lot more edits in there. We're going to have a lot more fun with these videos and trying to get creative moving forward. And I'm glad that there wasn't a wicked amount of confetti and this stuff's going to be easy to clean up.
Yeah, that was a respectable amount. Like, I feel special and I don't feel bad about who has to clean it up.
Oh, man. And my wife almost made an appearance on the channel. But, Matt, we have those 14 categories. We're going to throw them up there for you. Let's go through these 14 and break them down. Male Fighter of the Year. non-champion. So male fighter of the year, non-champion. That's the big caveat. A lot of these other award shows, they're going to say male fighter of the year, and it is a champion. Or female fighter of the year, it is a champion. With Fight Night Picks, we like to spotlight the fighters that had a crazy, incredible, maybe even a breakthrough year, but they didn't necessarily win the belt. And we'll leave that for another separate category. But when it comes to the MMA Male Fighter of the Year non-champion 2022, so many different fighters had some really big years. Now, like in years past, 2020, we had Kevin Holland was our winner. He went, 5-0.
He did, had an
Last
incredible
year,
year.
there were a lot of fighters that had big years. But for this year, we threw it out there on Twitter, on the YouTube community tab. You can find us there all the time. We're really active there. But our 5 nominees are as follows: Roman Dolidze, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Marlon Vera, Sergey Pavlovich, and Drew Dober. And you guys really showed up in the YouTube community tab. I'm looking at it right now. There's almost 1,000 votes. There's 23 comments. And in that, we put Rakhmonov, Jamal Hill, who had a hell of a year, and he set himself up for a title shot after a big year. Marlon Vera and Hamzat Chimaev, the most votes, 41%, are with Marlon Vera. So let's go through these 5 guys that we actually did select, not the ones that we threw out there in the community tab, because the reason why we threw one of the guys out there, everybody was all over us for not throwing Roman Dolidze down in the comments. Maybe that was by design. But if you do look at it for Vera, went 2-0, fight of the night against Rob Font, and then he went out there and finished Dominic Cruz. He had 6 knockdowns in 2 fights.
Marlon Vera truly had an incredible year, but the problem is he already started from a pretty good spot. And that's the thing about this male fighter of the year. You can't just look at the position that these fighters currently occupy in the rankings. You have to remember where they were all the way back at the start of the year. And fortunately, but also unfortunately for Marlon Vera, he's one of the best fighters in his division for 2, 3, probably 4 years by now.
His 2021 was huge.
It was, exactly. So for him, it's almost a disservice to himself that he's been so good for so long at this point. But some of the other people on this list, like you had mentioned, Roman Dolidze, from unranked to potential contender. Shavkat Rakhmonov, here's the thing. I can't claim that I'm the Shavkat Rakhmonov hipster and also say he's fighter of the year, because I've been saying this guy should fight Hamzat for a hot minute now. Check the tape.
Hey, the people
exactly.
want it.
And hey, y'all should have been listening to us for a while. But again, that's the thing. If you knew, you already kind of knew how good Shavkat was. He just wasn't getting those higher level opportunities. So I feel like he is kind of placed in the same boat as a Marlon Vera, and that's why he can't win the award.
For Shavkat Rakhmonov, 2-0, first round finish over Carlston Harris. That was a hook kick. His next time out, he takes on Neil Magny. Performance bonus, gets the submission in the second round. We also have Sergey Pavlovich. He went 3-0. Performance of the night bonus against Shamil Durkimov. He beats Tai Tuivasa. He was able to go out there and beat Derek Lewis as well. Those finishes that Pavlovich had, 4 minutes and 3 seconds
Pretty
against
impressive.
Durkimov, 55 seconds against Derek Lewis, 54 seconds against Tai Tuivasa. And I think it was BT Sport on their awards show that actually came out just before we recorded this. They have him as their breakthrough fighter of the year. For me, he has such a big record. Like, he's really forced his way up. He was the Fight Night's global heavyweight champ. He had a lot of notoriety. But this was his coming out year, and I think he definitely deserves to be in this kind of pantheon of greatness right now.
Without a doubt, but all these fighters had tremendous years, and that's the thing. It's not like you can really separate them all that much. All these people were either 2-0, 3-0 with multiple finishes over a lot of high-level opposition, too.
Drew Dober, a guy who is now ranked in the lightweight division. First round finish over Terrence McKinney. No bonus. That was almost a one-round fight of the year.
Wild.
They're knocking each other down. He gets the finish win. He goes out there, takes on Rafael Alves, finishes him with a body shot in the third round. That's a performance
Incredible
bonus.
fight, too.
And then his last time out against Bobby Green, the come from behind, the big win in the second round. He hits him with that hook. Performance of the night bonus. So Drew Dober, 3-0, 3 finishes, and all of a sudden he's back in that kind of ranked lightweight contention, and there's so many names up there. And for Drew Dober, I mean, he's now the lightweight knockout king. That has to be said
Pretty
as well.
incredible.
So he's right up there with the Dustin Poirier, and maybe he gets a name like that next. Just don't put him up against any wrestlers so we can have fun fights like this.
Exactly.
But Drew Dober, another one of those guys, the folks really wanted to hear about him in the YouTube community tab.
The only problem with a guy like Drew Dober is, and I feel like we have been slowly eliminating a lot of people off this category, the issue with Dober is, We have kind of seen him against a lot of these top-level lightweights, and like you had mentioned, we know what his weaknesses are, we know what his strengths are. There is one guy that remains on this list we haven't completely eliminated yet, and the good thing about this guy, too, is he has a high enough ceiling, or at least he has led us to believe that up until this point, to where you don't really know where he could end up in this division.
Misho, the top comment under our poll in the YouTube community tab, Roman Dolidze, 3 knockouts against good opponents, absolute demolition of number 8, Jack the Joker, who barely gets finished, performance bonuses in all 3 of them. We're not going to do this with every category, but our male fighter of the year, non-champion, Roman Dolidze, he goes out there and takes on Kyle Dawkins. He's an underdog, finishes him in the first round, performance bonus, breaks his face. Like, it was scary what he was able to do in that fight. His next time out, he takes on, a really, really tough fighter in Phil Haas, and he not only tears his knee apart on the ground, then he stands him back up, and you think, this is the Roman of old. He's just going to goof around, play some games, get Eric Nixick involved. He goes out there and finishes him. That's another performance bonus. And then on 11 days' notice, replacing Derek Brunson, he takes on the number 8 ranked Jack Hermanson. And in that matchup, Matt, Roman Dolidze, now a lot of people wanted that calf slicer to be considered for submission of the year, but they kind of don't talk about the fact he won by TKO, ground and pound, but the calf slicer got it done. Roman Dolidze leaps and bounds. He is my male fighter of the year, and I felt a little cheeky for not including him in that poll.
I think he deserves it, though. Like we said, look at who we gave the award to last time, Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland was a fighter who went from unknown to one of the bigger stars in the UFC, and I think that's fair to say by the end of the year. And for Dolidze, he occupied a very similar spot. He was a very talented fighter who had a lot of promise. We had just never really seen him finally get to his full potential. This year we saw what his full potential was, and it was absolutely destructive. So congrats to Roman Dolidze for an incredible year.
He was such a wild striker when he was with WWFC. Now he's incorporated that into the UFC. He was such a good grappler from the time at FILA, ADCC, and even the Flash in the UFC. And now all of a sudden he's doing everything in spades. So we had Kevin Holland in 2020, last year Islam Makhachev, and this year our male fighter of the year, Roman Dolidze. Female fighter of the year, non-champion, Natalia Silva, Erin Blanchfield, Yasmin Jauregui, and Vanessa Demopoulos. So Matt, female fighter of the year non-champions, we have a list of 5 different fighters here, and we have categories, and we have 5 fighters, participants, what have you. But out of this list, a lot of the women that competed this year in the UFC and in MMA in general, there weren't a lot of women that had a lot of fights. Straight up. Vanessa Demopoulos is the only woman in the UFC to win 3 fights. She went 3-0, and through them, Jinyu Fry, she beats one tricky fighter, Maria Oliveira, after losing the first round, comes back with a storm. And then she started off the year with that crazy knock-him-out, drag-him-out fight against Silvana Gomez-Juarez. She gets dropped. She gets a submission. Demopoulos had a great year. Jauregui went 2-0, fight of the night against Lucindo, even though they didn't give them fight of the night. That was one of the craziest fights. And then her last time out gets dropped early against Estela Nunes, comes back, mops her. You have Erin Blanchfield that just continues to grow leaps and bounds. She was, our rookie of the year last year, if I'm not mistaken. And then, of course, Manon Fiorot and Natalia Silva. Fiorot just continued to level up. And for Natalia Silva, she fought in 2019 with Jungle Fight. She was a champ. Then she didn't fight till 2022. And she looked like a completely new fighter. Broke her ulna, during that long break. But Natalia Silva, you got to give her flowers. Blanchfield, 63% of our YouTube community went with her for this award. But Matt, these women are really deserving of a lot of praise and recognition.
Without a doubt. Now, I do tend to side with how some of our YouTube voters voted with this one. I do feel like for me, Erin Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot probably had the 2 best years. You bring up the fact that Demopoulos was able to go 3-0, and that's a very impressive feat just to stay that active. Because think about how many fighters there are in the UFC where we say, hey, if they fought more than once every 13 months, they'd probably be a ranked fighter by now. You can't say that about Vanessa because she has been active, and that's a really important thing, and I do applaud her for being active this season, or this year. But Manon Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield are both in very different stages of their career. For Manon, she's knocking on the door of a title shot. Not only that, a lot of people think she could be a very difficult test for somebody like Valentina Shevchenko. And Blanchfield, she kind of feels like where Fiorot was 9 months ago, maybe 12 months ago. Maybe that's pushing her a little bit too much, but she has a similar ceiling. She just hasn't been able to realize it up until this point, whereas Fiorot has been able to fight some higher level opposition.
And Fiorot, again, we considered her most improved. We considered her for a lot of categories last year. All of a sudden, she's at the start of the year, she's ranked 13th, and she's fighting a 4th ranked Jennifer Maia, beats her there. Then she's ranked further up, she's ranked 6th, taking on the number 1 ranked Caitlin Chukagian. She looked great in both of those fights. And for Erin Blanchfield, if you do consider it, she goes out there, she only went 2-0, but she did beat JJ Aldrich, and she lost on the feet in the first round. She was losing at points in the second round. Standing guillotine finishes aren't very easy, and they don't happen every day.
Are so good.
And she looked amazing in that one. And then against Molly McCann, like, you want to talk about just ruining a promotional push. She was able to go out there, capitalize on that winner last time out. I know this one, again, 22% of our fans going with Manon Fiorot, 63% going with Erin Blanchfield. It is a tough one, but
there's not a wrong answer, I don't think, to be fair. Like I said, they by far, those two are head and shoulders above the rest. Again, I bring up the fact that Demopoulos is able to go 3-0. Very impressive. But Manon Fiorot is, like I said, on the doorknob of a title shot, and I think she would do very well against Shevchenko. Shevchenko looked human, let's say, her last time out against Talia Santos, so I think Manon Fiorot could improve upon that. And we might even see her maybe with a championship belt around her waist by this time next year is a bit of a stretch, but at least in a title shot by this time next year. So for Blanchfield, maybe she'll get this award next year, but I feel quite comfortable giving it to Manon Fiorot.
All of these women had great years. Manon Fiorot, our 2022 female non-champion fighter of the year. Definitely deserving of it. The former EFC champ, the winner of their version of the Ultimate Fighter, and maybe knocking on the door of a title shot in the UFC. And your nominees for MMA Channel of the Year: MMA Fighting, Morning Combat, MMA On Point, Chael Sonnen, and the Fighting Business. So Matt, this is a new category that we're throwing out there for the 2022 MMA Awards. And if you do look at this, you have some heavy hitters, and I'll go through them really quickly. MMA Fighting has 1.55 million subscribers on YouTube. Chael Sonnen has 1.09 million. And MMA On Point, of course, 975,000 subscribers. The other two that are on there, Morning Combat, 134,000 subscribers, but they have the podcast, and they were able to win out at the MMA Awards, the World MMA Awards. We're just Fight Night Picks. They're the world.
Exactly.
So they really do have a lot of recognition. Luke Thomas from his time with Name the Website, and Brian Campbell with CBS Sports. They both do such great work. And for the Fighting Business, if you've never checked out that YouTube channel before, you talk about some of the most well-edited, thought-out, fleshed-out, and presented videos I've seen in MMA, and they're all around 10 minutes. So if you want to go out there, deep dives on fighters, deep dives on recaps, they're great videos. They're coming out, a few times every couple of weeks. So a really, really good job. Some really, really well-done videos. The Fighting Business is one of my favorite new channels going right now. Out of all of these nominees that we do have out there, I have to throw a caveat out there, Matt. And it is a heavy one.
Yeah.
I think it was in 2020, I wrote 3 videos for MMA On Point. So I will say that there may be some bias out there, but I still really like the channel.
There's no right answer to this, guys. I'm just going to say that right now. It just depends on what flavor of the month you're into. You might want strawberry ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream. Neither one of us are right for having a different opinion, and that's really what this comes down to. Chael Sonnen offers you something very different than what the guys over at MMA On Point do, or what guys at Mortal Kombat do. Morning Combat, sorry. They're going to break down the fights, they're going to do it in a humorous way, and then they're going to be able to give it to people who might not watch every pay-per-view or every single fight night, but I would say they cater more towards those people. The guy like Chael Sonnen, who's a lot more for the pay-per-view audience, I would say. It might not be as analytically driven, but there's going to be the stories behind it. You're going to have those weird ones where he's like filming it from inside of his car, kind of talking. So there is no right answer to this. MMA On Point, there's a lot of lists and whatnot. It's a lot more historic, if you will, because they're going to go back and tell you something about UFC 112 that you never knew. So it really just comes down to personal preference.
And if you do look at it, the Chael Sonnen, when he wears those glasses and then he does the Q&As, those are different. But like you said, with Morning Combat, you get the dissecteds, you get also the extra credit with Luke Thomas. MMA Fighting, of course, you're going to get the MMA Hour. You're going to get, the shows with Mike Heck. Between the links, you have on to the next one there as well. There's so much going on there. But to give this award away, this one's going to be a little bit different, Matt. I'm going to throw it out there. We have an acceptance speech for this award. So, Matt, you haven't seen this. We're going to get your reaction to this one. This is the acceptance speech for MMA Channel of the Year.
Hey! Big thanks to Matt and Craig. You guys are awesome. We love your breakdowns. Definitely watch them. I'm sure you guys have seen us in the chat a couple times. So much appreciated to you all for nominating us and selecting us as this year's winner.
Wait, we won? I thought we just got nominated. We actually won?
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt and Craig. We know you're sensible. Wait, did the community vote? We know your community is sensible. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know how this was selected.
Well, it doesn't matter because we won anyway.
It's a mystery.
Anyway, we've got more stuff coming up in the new year. We're doing some fun content, so yeah, stay tuned for more. We'll watch you, you watch us, and we it's like a circle.
Like for like.
No, not that.
Oh, not that.
Cheers though. Everybody enjoy MMA in the new year. Big fights and bigger something. Balls.
Sorry. We're sorry.
Stay hard.
See you later.
Bye.
So Matt, you had no idea.
I did not.
I went out
It's a very
there.
good acceptance speech.
I sent it to Jason and the guys from MMA on Point with the acceptance speech. But yeah, our 2022 MMA Channel of the Year
deserved.
award. Like I said, there could be some bias there, but I really do like the channel. My favorite thing that they've started to do even more, they did it a little bit last year, but they've started to do more fighter profiles, getting the fighters in, almost like what GQ does, and they kind of talk on some of the subjects. Their autopsy episodes after the pay-per-views,
Very high quality.
they're really, really good. I love the top 10s, but even with the top 10s, they're starting to branch off, and they'll just talk about one topic for an entire video. So I do like what they've done in the past year, and they're the winner of Channel of the Year.
It's like if Watch Mojo only did videos about MMA. I don't think I can give you a better sales pitch than that. So definitely go check those guys out. They do, like you said, a lot of different content. It's not just lists. It's not just podcasts. They have a little bit for everybody. So I really highly recommend you go check it out.
Another new one, MMA Podcast of the Year. The Ringer MMA Show, the co-main event MMA Podcast, the TSN MMA Show, Anik and Florian, and the Protect Your Neck Podcast. All right, so Matt, we have 5 totally different podcasts that are out there in the space. And of course, one of the bigger names that you're going to have, the Anik and Florian podcast. You have Ray Longo that kind of guests every now and again. He keeps it very real.
Yes,
Kenny
he does.
Florian, John Anik. You've got Brian Petrie over there. You've got Cody that's doing the damn thing behind the microphone. But those guys offer up something completely different because they'll get down and dirty on the topics. They'll talk about the fights. They'll kind of offer you a bit of a different look than some of the other shows that are out there, because the Ringer MMA Show, you might know all of the names. Chuck Mendenhall,
Exactly.
Pete C. Carroll, Ariel Helwani. They're going to do the thing that you've seen with MMA fighting. They're doing it over with the Ringer.
Kevin Clark's on there too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you're a fan of all the sports, you can get a little bit of that
can.
sometimes on that show. The co-main event MMA podcast, if you know the OGs, like we're talking like the Josh Grosses of the world, well, you get Ben Folks and Chad Dundas, and they're doing their damn thing. And my favorite part, I listened to their last episode this morning, and you had Chad talking about Paulo Costa and kind of his contractual situation when he was supposed to face Robert Whittaker, and he said he just does some things sometimes. He's just one of those little guys out there on Twitter causing mischief, and I thought that was the funniest thing.
Paulo
But
Costa, little guy.
they're lighthearted. They don't curse too much. They have a lot of fun about the topics in MMA. So Spotify, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, and then the two that I really do tune into quite a bit, the TSN MMA Show. Aaron Bronstetter is one of the best that's
That's
out
a
there,
great
but
show.
also Bazooka Joe Valtellini, Canadian Glory, legend from the past. But both of those guys really do break down a lot, and Aaron adds that extra little bit of an angle with his interviews on that show.
That's the cool thing about MMA. MMA didn't get started by podcast, but it's a sport that really embraced the medium early on, and it's allowed a lot of these shows to grow, not only this year, but in years past. But what I really like about the Ringer MMA Show is it's kind of new to the platform, and the weird thing about MMA is it's hard to get involved in this sport. Like, do you remember how hard it was to first get interested in MMA? It costs a lot of money, first of all, and B, it's not just like people talk about it like it's a basketball or a baseball where it just makes its way into casual conversations. You really have to seek out a lot of these platforms, but all the ones that you listed are phenomenal. And what I really like about shows like Anik and Florian, for instance, is they can offer you stuff that we can't. I can openly admit that right now. You know what John Anik does every single week? Talks to fighters all the time, like hundreds
or
dozens of
the
them.
judges or the commission members.
Exactly. So he does have that first-hand knowledge of, hey, over the weekend, X, Y, and Z happened, and he can give you that kind of information, and that's what I really appreciate.
There is one that we didn't touch on. Dan Tom with the Protect Your Neck MMA podcast. If you want to listen to a guy that's the most intense MMA corner I've ever seen, back in November, he cornered Oscar Willis, and oh my gosh, was he ever into it. I sent him a DM after it was over to congratulate him. But if you do listen to the Protect Your Neck podcast, he breaks down the fights in such great detail, and from his own personal experience of training, that's what I love. We can't really offer some of those same nuts and bolts types of things that Dan Tom's going to go do. So make sure you check that out. But Matt, I have 2 acceptance speeches. You saw one of them. I have another acceptance speech. Matt doesn't know about this one again. Here we
Hey, this
go.
is Kenny Florian. Just wanted to thank you guys for nominating us as Podcast of the Year. John Anik and I have been working on the podcast, I guess, for 7 years now. We appreciate the support. And on behalf of John, Cody Merrow, our producer, and the rest of the regulars, Ray Longo, Brian Petrie, all the guys who help support and make our podcast great, we thank you guys.
Matt, you didn't know that was going to happen.
MMA royalty is on the show. Kenny Florian fought for multiple UFC titles, okay? That's not any guy. That's the guy who talks about battle bots, Craig.
And he did wear the shirt, so appreciate that from Kenny. But the Anakin Florian podcast is the winner of our 2022 MMA Podcast of the Year award.
Well deserved.
And listen, I think maybe next year I'm going to reach out to Ray Longo and try and get him on the show, because we talk about him all the time. Harry Connick likes the freaking lasagna.
I don't think he realizes just how big of fans we are of Ray Longo and the weird places he has showed up on TV.
Well, Ray Longo, the whole crew over there, Anik and Florian MMA Podcast, make sure you go check it out. The winner of this year's Podcast of the Year award. Male Champion of the Year, Aljamain Sterling, Patricio Pitbull, Alex Pereira, Anatoly Malyakin, and Alexander Volkanovski. So Matt, 2022 was a year where a lot of belts changed hands.
Exactly.
And we only have, we have two fighters that gained their belts in 2022. In Anatoly Malyakin, he was able to go out there, won the heavyweight championship, or the interim heavyweight championship, one championship, taking on Kirill Grashenko. He beat him into a pulp.
It was so one-sided.
And then he went out there at the end of the year, and I tried to go through to see if he had ever competed at light heavyweight before, and his main training partner is Vadim Nemkov. And you're down on the fact that Nemkov-Romero isn't going to happen with Bellator in 2023, but Malyakin moved down in weight, took on Rainer de Ritter, the middleweight and light heavyweight champ. He was unbeatable, no losses, looked amazing, big favorite to go in there. And Malyakin walked him down and gave him a drubbing. So Malyakin is on this list. And I know a lot of people weren't too hot on that over in our YouTube community tab when we threw this one out there to you. But only 2% had him to get the trophy. But you look at it, you also had Alex Pereira. He was able to win his belt this year. That crazy come from behind 5th round knockout that he had over one of the middleweight goats that's out there in Israel Adesanya. Volkanovski kept his belt, 2 successful title defenses, one against the Korean Zombie, one against Max Holloway in the trilogy bout. And again, last but not least, Patricio Pitbull. He loses to AJ McKee. He comes back this year, He beats AJ McKee, and he looked really good in that fight. His fight against Adam Borch wasn't all that great. Borch is coming off a fight of the year against Mads Burnell, so he did stifle his offense, landed the heavier shots from the outside. But Matt, out of everybody that we have out here, 73% in our YouTube community tab poll have Volkanovski.
To me, it's only a 2-horse race, and this is the only problem I have with the way that we do kind of this fight of the year thing, is that when we do separate it into male champion of the year and just male fighter of the year, it kind of docks the fighters who win the title that year, because you sort of think about it in 2 different ways. You have Alex Pereira, non-champion of this year, and then you have him just getting the belt near the end of the year. But you can't forget, he had a similar rise to like a Roman Dolidze, where he went from kind of an unranked contender into being the talk of the middleweight division. He was outside the rankings, beat Sean Strickland, and let's be honest, maybe he got a bit of a fast track to a title shot. But it's not like he didn't make the most of it, and that's the really important thing about Alex Pereira. This is what I hate, when people say, oh, they got a fast track. He may have, but he made the most of all of his opportunities, and that's not his fault whatsoever. But with Volkanovski, I saw a stat this week, and I didn't believe it until I went and looked it up. He didn't lose a round this year. He beat Max Holloway 5-0, 5-0 as they would say in soccer. And then the fight against Korean Zombie probably didn't have to happen, because he was a minus 600 or 700 favorite in that, but he looked phenomenal.
Going into the 4th round against Korean Zombie, all 3 judges' scorecards were 30-26 for Alexander Volkanovski. Finishes him in the 4th. And I'll put the clip out there, like our reaction on our live show.
He's not making him pay, though, after he does get out of range. You'd like to see some. That was a beautiful move by Volkanovski. Made him think the left hook was coming, but hit him with the kick.
That right hand landed.
Yeah, it's over. I'm happy.
That was the weirdest stoppage I've ever seen in my life.
I'm so happy it was made.
Herb Dean grabs the winning fighter, grabs them.
I'm really happy with that
Pulls
stop.
back. No, that's a good stoppage. Standing TKO victory for Alexander Volkanovski. But it was tough. And I mean, Herb Dean just kind of picks him up and pulls him out. But a really good win there for Volkanovski. And then when he took on Max Holloway, 3 times 50-45. So no dispute there. But for Pereira, if you go through it, he beats Bruno Silva. And people are down on him from his fight against Gerald Mearshart.
Go watch his fight against Alex.
That fight was a really great one. He goes out there and finishes Sean Strickland in the 2nd round. And then his fight against Israel Adesanya. You look at the judges' scorecards going into that, all three had it 39-37, pulls a rabbit out of the hat, gets a finish. So this is the only award where we're going to give two away. Volkanovski and Alex Pereira, both co-male champions of the year. Aljamain Sterling, for what it's worth, he had a 2-0 year, split decision win over Piotr Jan, but left all those question marks behind him. He looked good in that fight. And then he beat TJ Dillashaw in October, as been noted. And from all you can, again, you go from beating Amir Ali Akbari in 2021 to coming out and having two title performances in two different weight classes with one championship. I just wanted to make sure we gave credit where it was due, because we don't get the chance to talk enough about one championship or KSW or Bellator. This is the show. But Volkanovski, Pereira, the champs for this year.
I think they're well deserving of it. Like we said, Volkanovski was the champ for the whole entire year, so every time you think about Alexander Volkanovski, he's got that belt around his waist. But you can't forget about just how incredible of a year Alex Pereira was able to have. Like you said, going from Bruno Silva, who's a good, tough fighter, but you definitely don't think about him in that top 5 capacity like you do in Alex Pereira at this point in the middleweight division. So I think this is more than justified to give out 2 awards.
Female Champion of the Year: Liz Carmouche, Larissa Pacheco, Zhang Weili, Amanda Nunes, and Zhang Jingnan. So Matt, when we break down Female Champion of the Year, this is one that gets really contentious with the fans. And this is probably the most contentious out of any of them. Again, we're going to reference this throughout the show, but we threw it out there to the YouTube community for you folks to try and make some sense of this. And out of the fighters that we did throw out there, Nunes, Weili, Pacheco, and Carmouche, 67% voted for Zhang Weili. She got that crazy win over Joanna at the start of the year. And then she goes out there and she beats Rose Namajunas. She looks amazing. But I want to go through these nominees that we do have, because for Liz Carmouche in the UFC, she went 0-2 in title shots. She fought at bantamweight, she fought at flyweight. You might forget, back with Strikeforce, she went 0-1 in title shots. She lost to Marlis Kunin back in 2011.
She's been around for a very long time.
She goes over to Bellator. She's already amassed a wild win streak, but she goes 2-0 in 2022, beats Juliana Velasquez. There was a little bit of a thou doth protest too much on the stoppage. There was no questions left for the second performance. She submitted Juliana Velasquez. So Liz Carmouche definitely deserving. Amanda Nunes goes out there, kind of beats the demons. She gets the win over Juliana Pena. Zhang Jingnan went 2-0 in title fights in 2022. She took on Ayaka Miura as well as Angela Lee. That was a rematch. They had fought down at strawweight a few years ago. They rematched. She wins by decision with one championship. Matt, Zhang Jingnan actually beats out Shevchenko to even be nominated in this.
And isn't that the wild thing? Potentially the most dominant women's champion that we have ever seen in the UFC, and I don't think that's a stretch at this point, is even nominated for the award, because we might be seeing Valentina kind of in the second half of her career, and I think that's fair to say. She's still extremely dominant. She's still beating a lot of these contenders, but we're starting to see that gap slowly get closer and closer and closer. So I think this is a great opportunity to highlight some of the other female champions from around the world, not just the UFC.
This is another one of those categories where you have a lot of fighters, and for Zhang Weili, for Pacheco, they fought fights before title fights in 2022. Carmouche is for the belt. Nunes is for the belt. If you look at it for Zhang Jingnan, those were also for the belt. For Pacheco, if you look at her overall career arc, she went 0-2 in the UFC, and she fought, let's go through it, Matt, Jessica Andrade and Jermaine Durandamy, and see you later. Good. And then over with the PFL, she's 0-2 against Kayla Harrison in 2019, but since then, 6-0, 4-0 in 2022, beats Kayla Harrison in the finals. To me, it's between those two. Nunes got 13% of the vote in our community tab. Again, Pacheco got 11%, Zhang Weili 67%. This is a tough one to give away.
It is, because for Zhang Weili, she was overwhelmingly dominant this year, and I do think she's probably the more likely of these two fighters that we're talking about to maintain her title reign going into next year and even after next year. But like you had said, you set it up perfectly. Think about the career of Larissa Pacheco coming up to this year. Nobody thought she had a snowball's chance in hell to beat Kayla Harrison this time around for the third time. She pulled off one of the great upsets in women's MMA history. And
MMA history.
Exactly. And it didn't happen on the prelims of some fight night where no one's ever going to remember it again. It happened in the title fight for $1 million in the PFL. Like, if you're going to pull a rabbit out of your hat, Larissa Pacheco picked the perfect time to do it. So, for me, I like rewarding her for pulling off such a big upset.
Yeah, and listen, a lot of people going with Zhang Weili, the Ned's MMA channel. Zhang Weili, no question.
Don't
Dan says, well, out of these choices, Angela Lee fought a much harder opponent, Stamp Fairtex, so there's somebody out there. And then you also have King Kid saying should be Pacheco, most underdog of them all. Larissa Pacheco, our 2022 female champion of the year. Zhang Weili's been there. She'll get more chances, but for Pacheco, this was her year. 4-0, capped it off with that title performance. Pacheco, the winner. Knockout of the year. Michael Chandler over Tony Ferguson. Alex Caceres over Julian Erosa. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson over Adriano Moraes. Marlon Vera over Dominic Cruz. And Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman. So Matt, 2022 was a wild year. There were a lot of knockouts. Submission of the year is going to be a little more tricky, but when it comes to the knockouts, obviously one really does stand out to a lot of people. 2 of our nominees are in title fights. One's with one championship, one's with the UFC. And if you do consider it, we have a really late entrant in the last UFC card of the year in the tricky little, I'm going to throw a left shot and then bring my left leg up to knock out Julian Erosa for Alex Caceres. Caceres, 6-1 in his last 7 fights. Like, he lost to Sadiq Youssef. And Alex Caceres, I mean, give him his flowers. He was ranked 2 weeks before that fight. Now he's still, well, he is ranked. He's ranked 15th right now. But out of all of these, Matt, again, it feels like one really does take the cake. If we do look at it in our YouTube community poll, 67% went with Edwards Usman and 23% went with Chandler Ferguson. But for Johnson Moraes, Johnson got finished by a one championship Rising style knockout in the first fight. In the second fight, he lands a right hand that wobbles Moraes, and then he jumps for a flying knee and drops him against the cage.
It was an incredible fight by Demetrius Johnson, and it was just an incredible performance from point A to point B, because a lot of people thought it was over for him. Let's just call it what it was. Like, after that finish, people were genuinely concerned about how Mighty Mouse is going to look.
Moraes looked 2 weight classes bigger in that
Exactly.
fight.
Moraes looked huge, but Johnson, like you said, proved that he's the champion, and really the all-time great champion that he is, by showing incredible heart, because he had some big shots in that fight too in the rematch. So that was an incredible one. One of these knockouts though spawned like the best line of the year, and it was pound for pound bang headshot. What Leon Edwards did to Kamaru Usman in the 5th round of their fight, I will never forget until the day I die, and I promise you that. That image of Kamaru Usman just laying on the ground with his eyes open as Leon Edwards is marching around the ring triumphantly. And I'm not one of these people who gets really cheesy into sports. It takes a lot to make me cry. I'm not gonna lie though. That FaceTime where Leon Edwards is FaceTiming his mom, like, we did it, like, you don't gotta worry about anything. We are champions now. That's one of those incredible moments in MMA history.
Edwards had a good first round. And then the next 3 went really poorly. And then the 5th round, not that it was going all that great, but if you do look at it, all 3 judges had it 39-37. And you saw Daniel Cormier, I almost said Dominic Cruz, he's also an entrant in this, but Daniel Cormier, I was writing his obituary. Joe Rogan was saying the same thing. And both these knockouts, the Marlon Vera over Dominic Cruz, he had 3 knockdowns in that fight, did Marlon Vera. Wow. He timed it with the left kick, same thing as Edwards. Both similar shots, both similar head kicks. One was for the title. So yeah, Leon Edwards is the knockout of the year, bar none.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, but like you said, there were incredible choices to pick from this year. Like, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson was a front kick up the middle of a fight that, at least in the first round, was this back and forth war where both guys had got hurt. So I feel like there's a lot of deserving entries, and this could have been a top 15, a top 25 probably.
Down through the categories, I mean, time is not a line. This one's so tough. They're all spectacular. But Leon over Usman is the most dramatic in terms of how that fight was going the most on the line. And Bananas and Grapes saying, DJ's knockout is very underrated, but so is one championship. Submission of the year. Stevie Ray's modified twister over Anthony Pettis. Oliver Enkamp's inverted triangle over Mark Lemminger. Claudio Poyez's first round knee bar over Clay Guida. Paul Craig's triangle over Nikita Krylov. Yuri Prohashka's 5th round title win over Glover Teixeira. So we threw this one out there to you folks. YouTube community tab. Ray Pettis, Craig Krylov, Enkamp Lemminger, and Poyez Guida, and then other explained below, because you only get 5 options there. And out of everybody, 43% voted for Paul Craig's comeback against Nikita Krylov. But if we go through these, obviously one jumps out. It's winning awards left, right, and center. And we're going to talk a lot about Prohashka and Teixeira in this show. But that submission win, I mean, it's so great. And it's such a capping moment to win the belt.
Oh, yeah.
Of a no-hook rear naked choke. Something that we don't see all the time, but we see it every now and again.
We're going to talk about that fight a lot, I can already tell. I'm not going to lie. That might be my favorite fight of all time. That's like, it's so incredible. They hurt each other every punch they throw, and the grappling's insane too. That one does stand head and shoulders above a lot of these other ones, but this was an interesting year for submissions. I don't really feel like there was one that really stood out as a, wow, this was like a new technique we've never seen before.
The Enkamp, as he's doing it, John McCarthy says, oh, it's a buggy choke, and then Enkamp goes on his YouTube channel. And
you're not going to like what I'm about to say, though. Anthony Pettis has also been finished finished by another submission we had never seen before, and it was a body triangle by Dustin Poirier. So, if we're gonna say, wow, you did something to Anthony Pettis no one's ever done, it's not like he's Luka dropping 60, 20, and 10.
Those two are cool, though. Modified twister, the buggy choke that was then clarified to an inverted triangle. But Claudio Puelles, 2021, he has the knee bar win over Chris Gritzmacher. About 5-6 months later, he takes on Clay Guida. Guida rushes in for the takedown, and then, whoop, just like that.
It was a fun submission.
Puelles is able to grab that knee, and I know people are going to be down on him because a lot of people that follow our channel, you're only as good as your last performance. And Puelles didn't look good against Hooker, and he just kept trying to grapple and go for knees. But Puelles in that moment looked amazing. But Matt, again, we're going to talk a lot about Prochazka. There's one we haven't talked about. Friggin' Paul Craig did it again.
But that's the thing. Do we talk him points because you expected at this point? Because Paul Craig is great at one thing. If you think you're about to beat him and you're going to knock him out with ground and pound, to quote Judas Priest, you got another thing coming. Because Paul Craig is insane off of his back. He is one of the most terrifying figures in MMA with his triangle chokes, with his guillotines, with his defensive submissions. So, like you said, the fact that he was able to pull it off again is just a testament to how incredible of a grappler Paul Craig really is.
And this was the time where it really looked like he was out. So that is our submission of the year. Paul Craig beating Nikita Krylov. Now again, he went out there and fought Volkan Oezdemir, and just like Claudio Puelles, didn't look good in the next performance. But against Krylov, like, he's getting hit and he's not even defending it. And then just snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat, as they always say on the YouTube broadcast, or the UFC broadcast, rather. Paul Craig, our winner of Submission of the Year. Rookie of the Year, Jailton Almeida, Muhammad Mokaev, Caio Borralho, Jack Della Maddalena, and Bo Nickel. So Matt, when it comes to all 5 of our entrants for Rookie of the Year, there's only one that didn't fight in the UFC, but he fought twice over on Dana White's Contender Series and made his pro debut inside of 2022. That's Bo Nickel. All of these 5, they all went 3-0 in 2022. So a big enough sample size for everybody. And we did throw this one out there, YouTube community tab, and there were a lot of different thoughts on this category by and large. Jack Della Maddalena leads with 50% of the vote share there. But if you do go down through this, for Jack Della takes on Pete Rodriguez in his debut, knocks him out in the first round. Pete was 4-0 at the time.
He was.
Then he takes on Ramazan Emeev, former Round 1 Global middleweight champ. Emeev was 20-5, knocked him out in the first round.
I was very impressed by that.
Getting taken down and getting back up. And then his next time out, he takes on Hot Chocolate Danny Roberts, who was, 18-5, 18-6 at the time. Knocked him out in the first round. Almeida took on Danilo Marquez, PFL Challenger Series entrant. I just saw that. That just came across the wire before this. Beat him by first round TKO ground and pound. Took on Parker Porter Jr., who's 13-6. That was somewhat a short notice, and Jailton weighed 224 pounds against the 265-pound heavyweight. Submitted him in the first round. His next time out, took on Anton Turkalj, who was 8-0. That was on short notice. Submitted him in the first round. Mokaev took on Durden, first round submission. Charles Johnson, the former champ of the LFA, unanimous decision, beat Malcolm Gordon. Borralho beat Omar Gadzhiev by technical decision. He beat Petrosian, beat Muradov, and yeah, I mean, those are the guys. And for Bo Nickel, not the greatest level competition. Fought a pro debuter, fought Zach Borrego on Dana White's Contender Series, who was 3-0. Fought the CFFC champion Donovan Beard, who was 7-1. This is a tough one for Rookie of the Year, and there were a lot of great women. Again, I think Erin Blanchfield won it for us last year for Rookie of the Year. She did. But these guys all had great years.
I think 3 of them to me really stand out, though. And like you had mentioned, did Bo Nickel fight the best level of competition? Probably not. But if you want to project what his ceiling is moving forward, I don't think it's difficult to argue he has one of the higher ceilings we have seen in MMA.
He could go on a Pereira run and it wouldn't surprise anybody.
Because for as good as Pereira is in kickboxing, Bo Nickel equals that in his wrestling and might even surpass it in some cases. So for Bo Nickel, I think he deserves at least an opportunity to win this award. And the other 2 for me is Jailton Almeida and Jack Della Maddalena. And for me, it just really comes down to how do you want to give this award out? Do you want to give it out to who has the highest ceiling, or which rookie was able to accomplish the most and have the most memorable year? Because Jack Della Maddalena was probably involved in the more memorable fights, I would say. He fought the higher level of competition. You bring up the Emeev win. The Emeev win in hindsight insight might not mean as much to some people, but I went into that video really trying to give Ameev his flowers, because for a rookie and only their second fight in the UFC, Ramzan Ameev is a very difficult guy to fight. He has good cardio, good wrestling. I know we'll tire a little bit later on, but that's a difficult guy to match up with. He finished him, and then he finished Hot Chocolate, like you had mentioned, who isn't a top 15 guy, but he's a good gatekeeper to then get you fighting real fighters after that. And for Jailton Almeida, I don't know if we've ever seen a guy with his skill set in the heavyweight division. You bring up his lack of size, it might be an advantage for all we know.
What division's he going to compete
Exactly,
in?
and that's the thing too. This guy could be a light heavyweight. He could be what we were told Brandon Vera was going to be all those years ago in the UFC.
Or what John Jones could be.
Exactly. So this is a great division, a great category to break down, because all these fighters, again, they're going to have high ceilings because they're all nominated for Rookie of the Year, but I genuinely think all 5 of these fighters are going to be ranked fighters sooner rather than later.
We'll go through the comments. Anthony Rivera Medina saying, Jailton is the best guy here, but Jack is just more flashy. Hot Dog said, surprised not to see Joe Pyfer on the list. I think Jack Della is super legit. 2023, the rise of Jack Della. And I responded to that and said, hey, he looked great against Diaz, and then he fought a guy who was, 0-4 in the UFC, and poor Amadovsky. But that is a good one, because B. Joe Pyfer was out there. Some people like Bohalio. I think he's got a really high ceiling as well, and he was the one out of all of these guys that didn't necessarily win and really wowed you and flew off the page, but his ground game is that next level. But for me, Matt, Jailton Almeida runs across the cage, takes guys down, scissors the legs, gets their back. It's all so formulaic and it's so efficient, whether it's at light heavyweight or heavyweight against the biggest heavyweight you're going to find in Parker Porter. Jailton Almeida is the Rookie of the Year in 2022, and it might be, again, contentious. Jack Della, Almeida, they're neck and neck, but Matt, giving it to Almeida this year.
I think it's a great pick. Again, for Jailton Almeida, he has such a unique skill set for where he is in the division that he does occupy, or the divisions perhaps, because normally guys in the heavyweight division, light heavyweight division, they really accentuate their punching power, they try to knock you out, and then they lack some of those other more refined skills. Jailton Almeida is almost the opposite. He has those refined skills, he has the grappling, he has good power on the outside too, and I think Jailton Almeida is setting himself up for a huge 2023. But Jack Della Maddalena kind of reminds me of an earlier Robbie Lawler, maybe a little bit. Like, he might not win every single fight in his UFC tenure, but he's going to have a very memorable one, I do believe, because he cannot avoid getting into those fight of the night style fights, and he does have incredible punching power.
Shouts to scrappy MMA zone Jack Della Maddalena. Most improved fighter in 2022. Aaron Blanchfield, Julian Arosa, Shane Burgos, Matt Frivola, Marlon Vera. So for most improved fighter of the year award, last year we actually gave it to Giga Chikadze. You might find that unbelievable. Chopped liver is what it is, but he had an amazing 2021 before he fought Calvin Kattar. But this year, we have some very, very deserving participants. I mean, for Aaron Blanchfield, 2-0, 2 finishes. JJ Aldrich won over Molly McCann, and all of a sudden, she's in the conversation to fight better flyweights. Matt Frivola, so you're a boxer now? He's credited with 5 knockdowns in 2 fights. I counted 6 in just the fight against Renato Valdez alone, but he also knocked out Otman Zaitser. For Shane Burgos, added something new to his game, and he stuck to game plans. And he went out there and he threw leg kicks, and he implemented takedowns. Some people might think that it was because he fought a lower level competition, and in some fights he's used the kicks before, but Burgos is able to show out, and then he ended up with the PFL. Marlon Vera just continued and built on a 2021. He went 2-0 there, he went 2-0 in 2022. Both main events, one over Rob Font, fight of the night, one against Dominic Cruz, where he finished him. 6 knockdowns in both of those fights, if you add them up. And then, of course, if we just round it out, Julian Arosa, chop liver because he got put on a poster in our knockout of the year category.
Well, chop liver because he's had 4 runs in the UFC, I think. I don't think you can just say the fans get rid of people because they've got 1 loss.
No, but he took on Alex Caceres, and it is recent. But before that, a win over Hakeem Dawodu where nobody picked him or nobody thought he had that big of a chance. And before that, he had a fight of the year contender against Steven Peterson. He's just continued to add to that tool belt, and he got caught his last time out. So, Matt, obviously, Rose is probably going to get left to the wayside, and Shane Burgos is also going to get left to the wayside. So you have Blanchfield, Frivola, and Marlon Vera left, and 78% of the voters in our YouTube community tab went with Marlon Vera on this one.
Marlon Vera beat 2 of the best fighters in the world and has set himself up for a #1 contender shot early next year. Marlon Vera could be Fighter of the Year next year. I'm not even joking when I say that. Like, he's been knocking on that door for 2 years now.
And he was on our
Fighter of
list
the
there,
Year.
too.
Exactly. So, I know I had said earlier that it's difficult to give a guy like Marlon Vera Fighter of the Year because he was already really good entering this year. But the really cool thing about Marlon Vera is he's been able to fix the small issues that you do look for when you talk about all-time great fighters, really all-time great athletes. Like, I was just listening to, it was Shannon Sharp talking about Deion Sanders. And Deion Sanders said, hey, people used to say, if you just run at my side, I can't tackle anybody. And he's like, it's just because I was so good at everything, you have to find a small weakness. For Marlon Vera, it was, hey, when's he going to turn up the aggression? When's he going to really fight like he needs it? Marlon Vera really went after it this year, and I know he got behind a little bit in some of the exchanges with Dominic Cruz, but every time he landed on that man, he put him down, and he looked better as the fight went on. I think Marlon Vera has set himself up as well as any of these fighters moving into the next year.
So Marlon Vera continued on the path, refined some of his skill sets. Aaron Blanchfield struggled with some of the striking in her fights. A lot of people are going to overlook that and just focus on the positives of the submissions. But one fighter on this list did something they'd never done in their entire career, and that's Matt Frivola. Matt Frivola went out there and became a boxer against Renato Valdez, who's a striker, and Otman Zaitser, who's a striker. And Matt Frivola went out there and knocked both of those guys out. So, Matt, this year, you just talked a lot about Marlon Vera, but Matt Frivola is our Most Improved Fighter of the Year award.
Yo, Fight Night Picks. Thank you for awarding me with the 2022 Most Improved Fighter Award. You know, I appreciate it. Me and Longo have been working that boxing a lot this year, and it's showing in my fights. You know, we're dropping these hammers on people, and I look to continue to be dropping hammers in 2023. So, you know, stay rolling, baby. Stay rolling. Let's go.
The others that we had out there that we need to mention, Bilal Muhammad, Fares Ziam, and of course, Ryan Spann. Those guys had wild years. They continued to add to their skill sets. And for Bilal Muhammad, might have been the Diego Lima fight where he started to see a little bit of striking, but the fight against Sean Brady, you were really, really able to see it there. So a lot of deserving fighters in the Most Improved Fighter of the Year award category. Gym of the Year, American Top Team, Killcliff FC, MMA Lab, Extreme Couture, Teixeira MMA and Fitness. So for Gym of the Year, Extreme Couture won last year. And listen, so many champions and different fighters have gone to Vegas just before their fights, and they just kind of refine things a little bit with Eric Nixick and all of the great training partners that are there. Like Sergey Spivak's a guy I can think too, hey, he went there, he's gotten a lot better. Francis Ngannou, he goes there, he gets a lot better. Now. There's so many fighters that have gone to Couture and gotten better, and this year, maybe the champs haven't necessarily been there, but we've seen a lot of good fighters that have Extreme Couture. American Top Team's always on this list, and they always have such good fighters. Marcus D'Amata, you've got Mike Brown. There's so many good, Conan Silveira that's there. So many good coaches and people to train with. Killcliff FC is going to be there now. That used to be Sanford, used to be Hard Knocks, used to be what else? Was it Black Zillions at one point? Or
I think it might be, yeah. It's been a lot of different names.
They've had a lot of names, but a lot of really good fighters there. Usman's come and gone out of that gym. Gilbert Burns has been there. Michael Chandler, just some of the big names that are there. Robbie Lawler, Lint Vassell, who's the hotness with Bellator
Michael
again.
Johnson.
There's so many fighters. And then the other two that are here that you might go, really? MMA Labs had a lot of really good fighters, and Sean O'Malley and Jared Cannonier had good 2022s, but that only kind of scratches the surface there. And then, of course, you have Teixeira MMA and Fitness, but the weird thing about that gym is Glover Teixeira's had a lot of fighters out of Brazil that have gone to that gym to train. Now, all of a sudden, a lot of other fighters are going there. Yeah. Dominic Reyes didn't have a good fight his last time out. And who else? Sabina Mazo went to train there and it didn't really work out. But there are a lot of other fighters. And oh, by the way, Glover was a champ. Now Alex Pereira is a champ.
If you just look at who the best fighters are in every single gym, the two best fighters at Glover, Teixeira, whatever it's called, they're probably better than any two top fighters in any other gym. Like, that's the crazy thing, too. We never talked about Connecticut as a hotbed for MMA training, ever. This gym wasn't even talked about last year for these awards. And the fact that Glover has been able to build this roster up to what it is now is truly remarkable, because a lot of these gyms, they kind of come in and come out, but you'll always kind of hear about them. Like, Team Alpha Male is a good example. Team Alpha Male was really big, kind of went away for a couple of years, but now you hear about a little bit more with guys like Song Yadong fighting under that gym. Glover or Teixeira MMA just came out of nowhere, and now it seems to be a powerhouse of MMA.
I kind of like the Cinderella stories, if you didn't know, from Most Improved Fighter with Matt Frivola winning, but when it does come to this one, it goes to Teixeira MMA and Fitness because they just kind of came out of obscurity from the wilderness and boom, they're on the scene. and all of a sudden 2 world champs at the highest level. Now, I know Teixeira was a champ in 2021, but still, when you do look at it, now all of a sudden they have a stable of stars. Like, it's I think you should leave.
Fighting for a belt the next fight.
And he is fighting for a belt in January. So all of a sudden, Teixeira MMA and Fitness, our gym of the year for 2022. Performance of the year: Adam Boric over Mads Burnell, Clay Collard over Jeremy Stevens, Alessandre Pantoja over Alex Perez, Alexander Volkanovski over the Korean Zombie, and Calvin Kattar over Giga Chikadze. So I threw this category out there on Twitter. I threw it out there in the YouTube community tab, and I know it was going to be a tough one because performance is really subjective. Is it because you won a Performance of the Night award? Is it because it was a really tough fight and somebody won out? That's kind of how I go at it a little bit. Or was it so lopsided that somebody looked so amazing in their fight? So when you go down through these, I'm going to explain them really quickly. Adam Boric and Mads Burnell had a fight of the night style fight. It's not in our category, but Adam Boric was able to land some really good shots in the back foot. He was able to implement his overall kickboxing game. Didn't even really need to wrestle in that one. And both those guys went at it. And then all of a sudden, Boric got a title shot out of that one. He didn't look good against Patricio, but still, that was a great fight that not a lot of people are going to talk about. Clay Collard against Jeremy Stevens. I showed my wife that fight a couple of months ago because it was an absolute bloodbath. But in that one, Stevens is trying to land all of his power shots. It was his first fight with the PFL, and Clay Collard's working head and body, and he just continued to wear on him, and he ate some really tough shots. His performance in that fight was amazing. Alessandre Pantoja fought, once this year? He took on the former title challenger. Everybody wanted to see Perez back. Pantoja walks out of the back on the main card of a pay-per-view with no shirt on, no shoes. He just walked out for business. They go across and throw hammers at each other, and then all of a sudden he just kind of trips Perez down, grabs his back, and submits him very, very quickly. If you look at it for Volkanovski against Korean Zombie, I know a lot of people want to see Max Holloway in that category instead of Korean Zombie because Volkanovski looked amazing in both performances. But going into the 4th round, 30-26 across all the judges' scorecards, standing TKO victory, flawless if you will say it. And for Calvin Kattar against Giga Chikadze, what some people might forget, Chikadze's 2021 was amazing.
He's a big favorite, yeah.
He was our most improved fighter of the year award. He looked amazing. Calvin Kattar was coming off of one of the most lopsided performances we've ever seen against Max Holloway. Took all the time away into that main event, and Calvin Kattar looked amazing in that fight.
And that's what I think you have to do when you're handing out an award like this. You can't think about it as us today, right now. You have to think about what your thoughts were on these fights going into the week of the fight, because I know we both sat here and said Volkanovski's going to beat the Korean Zombie. We both said he was going to do it pretty easily, too, and that there wasn't going to be a lot of issue. And guess what he did? Exactly what everybody thought he was going to do. So it's not that I'm trying to dock Volkanovski points. It just wasn't that unexpected he was going to beat the Korean Zombie. Not really. But what Calvin Kattar did against Giga Chikadze was truly surprising at the time of the fight. Because like you had said, Giga Chikadze is a great striker, but can kick. Calvin Kattar is a great striker, but throughout his career has struggled with some of those longer, rangier guys. And the question was, how is Kattar going to look after all this time off, after all the damage he's taken throughout his career, and with being a big underdog against, like I said, a very well-rounded striker in Giga Chikadze? Beat the shit out of that man. That fight wasn't competitive whatsoever. It was elbows on the inside, boxing combinations, going to the body, going to the head, being sound defensively too. And again, my opinion going into that fight was that Giga Chikadze is probably going to beat the brakes off Calvin Kattar.
Around the outside.
Exactly. Maybe fight a Josh Emmett next, maybe a Yair Rodriguez, a Brian Ortega. You get the idea. One of those names near the top of the division, and potentially set himself up for a title shot. Probably would have happened this current year. So for Kattar, I just think you have to put yourself back into your shoes of before that fight and just truly remind yourself how impressive that performance was.
Knockdown in the 5th round, that was a fight of the night. But for Kattar, the scores, 50-45, 50-45, 50-44. And I know MMA judging isn't in vogue right now, but that was January of last year. So Calvin Kattar against Giga Chikadze, our performance of the year. 31% of you went with Kattar and 53% went with Volkanovski. In the comments, Patrick Lee says, Pantoja running out.
That's pretty cool.
To many men by 50 Cent, hyping up the crowd, them running right at Perez to sleep in 30 seconds truly gave me goosebumps. Hype me the F up. Bob, honestly like to nominate Dariush versus Gamrot. Really love that performance.
That was a great fight, too.
Burns versus Hamzat was just like the Justin Chandler fight. There's a lot of people that nominated a lot of fighters out there, but we went with Kattar over Chikadze. Let us know what you make of that one in the comments. Comeback of the year. Chris Barnett over Jake Collier. Matt Schnell over Suma Derji. Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman. Yuri Prohashka over Glover Teixeira. Alex Pereira over Israel Adesanya. So Matt, we said this at the start of the show. 3 title fights, all 3 of them behind in their fights. For Leon Edwards, 3 times, 39-37 into the 5th round. For Pereira, exact same scorecards. And for Yuri Prochazka, 38-38, 39-37, 38-37. But all of those, like the 2 that were ahead, were for Teixeira. So all come from behind wins. And everybody's going to talk about those ones. But if we do look at it, the other 2 that we have, Matt Schnell against Sumit Arji. First round, there's grappling, there's striking, but Matt Schnell won the first round. Second round, Matt, I tried to count the amount of times that Matt Schnell was wobbled and rocked.
It was like baby on a rink.
Knees to the head, elbows. There were long shots from Sumit Arji, and then all of a sudden, Schnell, I don't even know if he cleared the cobwebs. He lands one shot that wobbles Sumit Arji, takes him down, submits him. That was a 2-round fight of the night. That was one of the wildest comebacks I've seen. But Chris Barnett, he goes from getting absolutely beaten and bloodied to the fact that his eyes swelled up. His left side of his face is droopy. The doctor came in, the referee came in, and then Mark Smith said, "You've got to fight back to start the second round." If he has to say that, just end the fight.
Well, no, they say that a lot. That's a very boxing thing to say.
But for Chris Barnett, he comes back. Jake Collier falls down and then just kind of lays down, and Chris Barnett gets his back, and he just hammers away, wins by ground and pound. So Barnett, he was our move of the year last year, and we had that as a category. But a big win for Chris Barnett, who weighed 267.5 for that fight. So no bonuses there, but he does get a mention for sure. But those 3 title fights, Matt, I know they meant a lot to a lot of people.
It just really comes down to what was more impressive to you. Now, all 3 of these title fights were very different, although they did all finish in a very similar result. Like, Leon Edwards probably had the least to give, I would say, in the 5th round of their fight. Like, his was probably the most surprising that it happened when he was able to land the head kick, because for Alex Pereira, throughout that fight when he had Izzy up against the cage, there were chances for him to land, and you did see sort of the precursors to what the finish was going to be. Whereas in Usman Edwards, it came out of nowhere, and for Prochazka versus Glover, yes, it was a back and forth fight, and yes, Glover was up, but there were so many times on both sides that you thought that fight was going to be over, either by Yuri by knockout or Glover by TKO, on so many different occasions that fight was kind of closer than you kind of remember, just because it was so volatile one way or another. But the fact that Edwards was just dejected, looked like he had nothing to give, looked like he was really only trying to just lose a decision, and then out of nowhere comes out and wins by head kick knockout, not against just a champion, this is the other thing I have to say too, against the guy who was ranked pound for pound number 1 in the world.
And if we're going to talk about that, ranked pound for pound number 1, GOAT in the welterweight division. That was all the conversation before. All the conversation.
But everybody. Joe Rogan and Dana White were trying to get that going, but the people who know that GSP.
Some of the most influential people in MMA were saying that he was the greatest of all time, and they weren't even teasing he should fight at middleweight for the title next. They were saying 205 is where Usman should fight.
He was saying that.
There was so much talk around Usman being the brightest and best, and 75% of you out there in the YouTube community tab voted Edwards over Usman. An honorable mention has to go to a guy who is kind of related to some of these fights, a former Israel Adesanya fight. It was Adesanya's UFC debut. Rob Wilkinson lost that fight, and then took years away.
He looked great this year.
And then he went 4-0 with the PFL and won the $1 Million Challenge. So Rob Wilkinson, honorable of honorable mentions, and it's not even like a comeback in a fight. It was just a comeback of the year award. Comeback. But Matt, I mean, yeah, it's got to go to Leon Edwards over Kamaru Usman in that fight. The kick, the way he was able to go out there, all 3 judges, 39-37, maybe even on the way to losing that 5th round. He looked great getting that. He looked great after the fight. He really did, compose himself well. And I can't wait to see what happens in that welterweight division moving forward, because I know there's certain fighters that realize what's going to happen. Jared Cannonier beat Sean Strickland, and then he goes on the mic and says, well, probably not going to get a title shot, so I'll fight somebody else. And if you do look at it, Usman's probably going to fight Edwards next time, and they'll have a trilogy. But that was such a great knockout and a great comeback.
It was, again, I've never been more shocked by the result of an MMA fight my whole life. But GSP's the GOAT of welterweight. This isn't an argument at all. The promoter and his employee promoted the current champion.
There were a lot of people that were hot and horny. But the comeback of the year award,
easily,
Edwards over Usman. And last but not least, it's the fight of the year. From the Bellator 277 prelims, Rogelio Luna versus Socrates Hernandez. Gilbert Burns versus Hamzat Chimaev. Cyril Gahn versus Tai Tuivasa. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. Our final of the 14 awards, 2022 Fight Night Picks MMA Award Show, Fight of the Year. There were so many good fights this year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this list could be a mile long, and we even have a Bellator prelim fight from 277 against a fighter who was making his pro debut against an 0-1 fighter, and I highly suggest that you go and watch that fight between Luna and Hernandez, because those guys just stood and tried to knock each other's blocks off for almost 3 rounds. Luna gets a finish in the 3rd round. Now, it's not going to win, because it had very, very low stakes, and they were, assuming they were both on, 1-1, but you get one fight with Bellator, you get one fight with Bellator, and then go on and live your lives. Those guys put it on the line on the prelims of a Bellator card. So if you're in Canada, you can check that one out on YouTube. I definitely did leading into this one, and it does not disappoint. But out of the other ones, Burns versus Chimaev, we get to see Chimaev's medal finally. He was tested. He won that fight. For Gane versus Tuivasa, we finally get to see Cyril Gane get rocked one time. His body kicks one out. But that UFC Paris card was so big. It was so influential. The Paris card, the London cards, they're definitely living up to it. Teixeira Prochazka in a big-time main event as well for a title. Matt Schnell, Sumaderji, that gets kind of an honorable mention here. And then Poirier-Chandler, you kind of knew going into it was going to be a fight of the night, but it definitely did deliver some dirty moves, a submission at the end of it, but both guys really gave it their all. But Matt, when it comes down to this one, so many great fights and so many that we can't even mention, but we kind of built this show up to one.
Prochazka and Teixeira fought like they had laundry lint and toothpicks in their pockets and no money. Like, they fought like they were on the Bellator prelims and like, hey, if you win this, we might give you another chance. But no, it was the main event of a pay-per-view for a UFC title. Like,
in Singapore.
But think about this. Like, we had talked about GSP earlier. Kamaru Usman had been criticized for this. Like, a lot of champions who have a lot of title defenses start to develop more of a safe style. They don't take as many risks. Glover Teixeira looked at himself in the mirror that morning and said, no, we're going to go out there and take some risks. And he did it. Like, he didn't fight trying to just be champion. He fought trying to beat Yuri Prochazka. And that means a lot. Like, Glover Teixeira may have lost his title this year. He didn't lose a single fan this year, though. If anything, he gained hundreds of thousands. So I think this fight, you have to give it its flowers. And the great thing about this fight was, it was brutal, which it sounds bad, but in the best kind of way. Like, they were impactful shots where both guys are getting hurt. The momentum is shifting from one side to the other, where both guys could get finishes at any point throughout the fight. And the great thing about it too, I know we didn't end up getting the rematch because Yuri ended up hurting his shoulder. To quote Dana, the worst shoulder injury we've ever seen. But if these guys ever get put in a rematch in the future, I'm going to be equally as excited for it, because you just know their fighting styles are catered towards each other.
Yuri was able to get close to the top of the mountain with Ryzen. Then he comes over to the UFC and there's so much intrigue. How good could he be? We even did a light heavyweight championship, like a March Madness bracket challenge. And frig, Yuri ended up at the end of it and won the whole damn thing. So all of a sudden, he's able to get into that title fight, and he looks amazing. He struggles at moments. He lands those impactful shots, like you said. And for Glover Teixeira, well, again, nobody thought he was going to beat Jan Blachowicz, or not many did, and not many thought he'd ever fight for a title again. He's into his 40s. And then he's the champ, and then he has that fight. So we'll see how it goes for Teixeira versus Jamal Hill when that fight happens. Can't wait to see Prochazka back, but with so much talk around comebacks and knockouts, the Leon Edwards fight against Kamaru Usman, a little bit more one-sided. The fight that you had between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya, not that it was one-sided, but it wasn't as competitive as this. This was one of the greatest fights we've ever seen.
It was, and I saw one of our commenters on an earlier award mention it, and I feel like it deserves praise. Gamrot versus Zarukian. Two guys who, a lot of people going into that didn't feel like they had really deserved a main event slot in the UFC. I think everybody realized how talented they were, but it was, hey, they're kind of both dark horses. Do they really deserve a 5-round fight like that? I don't care who you thought deserved to win that by the end of it. It was an incredible back-and-forth fight that did what you want fights like that to do. Put both athletes on the map. So I just feel like that's another fight that deserves to get a little bit of shine.
We'll go through your comments. 1,100 votes on this one in the community tab poll. 50% Teixeira Prochazka, 22% Burns versus Chimaev, 10% Schnell Sumaderji, and 16% Poirier and Chandler. Again, Luna and Hernandez have to be mentioned with Bellator. Go check that one out. Onama versus Landwehr is another one that a lot of people wanted to see. Time is not a line. I was there live for Schnell and Sumaderji. Long Island crowd was going insane. Jauregui versus Lucindo. That didn't even win a fight of the night bonus. That one's definitely up there as well. Morozov versus D. Silva, the pocket rocket. I mean, from D. Silva getting dropped in the first round to coming back, dropping him in the second round, getting the submission win. That one was crazy. Sean MMA saying Thompson versus Holland.
Great way to end the year.
That one was an insane fight for sure. Bernd Chimaev again, and it goes on. Castaneda versus Santos. It put Willie Cat back on the map. That was an amazing one. So again, so many fights out there. Prohashka versus Teixeira, one of the craziest ones we've ever seen. And I mean, if you consider it, even going back to last year, and if I just bring it up, Ortega versus Volkanovski was our fight of the year from last year, and it won a round of the year. That was a category that we had. But this one, back and forth so much between Teixeira and Prohashka, you kind of have to go with it.
Exactly. It had everything you look for in a phenomenal fight. And the fact that it goes late and still ends by finish before they go to the judges' scorecards, because let's be honest, something was probably going to get messed up there anyways. It was the perfect ending to the perfect fight, basically. And it's one of those ones where, again, I can't stress this enough. Those men could fight 5 times. I would be excited to watch them fight all 5 of those times. It's just a perfect matchup.
And 2022, what better way to cap it off with the fight of the year? It was an amazing year in MMA. Throughout the holidays, we're going to pop some more of those videos out there. We have the year-end awards. We had the MMA nickname tier list video. And then, of course, the first fight card that we're going to try and preview coming out in January, Imavov versus Gastelum. It already lost the co-main event.
I think it should be a fun main event, but I was really looking forward to that co-main.
We can't wait to go ahead with some of those previews that we have for 2023. Make sure you check out all of the great content here with Fight Night Picks. Hopefully you enjoyed the 2022 MMA Awards with Fight Night Picks. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.